Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning, and I'm brewing coffee in my kitchen when I hear the rumbling of diesel engines shattering the calm. The scent of exhaust mingles with the morning frost as 3 trucks come roaring up my gravel driveway like they own the place. Boots crunch over the frozen ground, drawing closer. Then, bang, bang, bang. 3 HOA board members are pounding on my weathered oak door, waving a demolition notice like it's a victory banner. They claim my 150-year-old family ranch is an eyesore that needs to be torn down immediately. Here's the kicker that still makes me smile. These 3 arrogant bullies had no idea I'd just been elected as their new HOA president the night before, and they'd been too smug to attend the meeting where it all went down. 4 generations, $2.3 million in property value, and 47 acres of prime land that survived the Dust Bowl. What would you do if strangers demanded you tear down your great-great-grandfather's homestead? Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I want to see how many of you have dealt with power-hungry HOA tyrants. Let me rewind and explain how this whole mess started. My name's Ezra Colton, and 2 years ago, I lost my wife, Sarah, to cancer. She was only 44, one of those rare people who could light up a room just by walking into it. The smell of her lavender perfume still clings to the curtains in our old suburban house, and sometimes I catch myself inhaling it, like a prayer. After her funeral, I found myself drowning in a sea of beige cubicles and quarterly reports. Corporate consulting had lost all meaning when you're sitting in sterile glass conference rooms arguing about profit margins, while your 16-year-old daughter, Melody, is trying to figure out how to live without her mom. That's when I remembered Sarah's last words. Take Melody home, Ezra. Take her to the ranch where your roots run deep. The Colton Ranch, 150 years of family history, carved into 47 acres of rolling pasture and weathered cedar. My great-great-grandfather Josiah homesteaded this land in 1874, when you earned your place with sweat, stubbornness, and a good rifle. The old barn still carries the sweet scent of hay mixed with decades of honest horse sweat. If you run your fingers along the oak beam above the main stall, you can feel Josiah's initials carved deep into the wood. 3 generations survived everything this land could throw at them. The Dust Bowl of the 30s tried to blow us away. We planted deeper roots. We survived economic crashes, droughts, and even a tornado in '98 that sounded like a freight train and ripped half the roof off the farmhouse. We rebuilt every time because giving up isn't in Colton DNA. 6 months ago, I packed up our suburban life and brought Melody home. She wasn't exactly thrilled about trading shopping malls for mucking stalls, but watching her brush thunder, our old bay gelding, while humming the same lullabies her grandmother used to sing, that's when I knew we'd made the right decision. Enter Priscilla Worthington Hayes. Every entitled suburban nightmare rolled into one perfectly manicured package. Picture a woman who thinks roughing it means staying at a hotel without room service. 52 years old, drives a white Tesla Model X, and parks it diagonally across 2 spaces like she's staking a claim on the world. She's never met a rule she couldn't bend to her will. Her husband, Bradley, develops those luxury communities where every house looks like a copy-paste job of the last. Here's the twist. Priscilla had been running the Sunset Meadows HOA like her personal fiefdom for 8 years. The association was formed in 1987, a full 113 years after my great-great-grandfather hammered his first fence post into this land. But according to Queen Priscilla, my rustic aesthetic was somehow dragging down property values in her neighborhood. The first unfair act came 3 weeks after we moved back. I was elbow-deep in fixing a burst water line when I heard the hum of her Tesla gliding up the gravel driveway like a spaceship landing in the wrong century. 2 pickup trucks followed her loyal lackeys, Brad Hutchkins and Dale Morrison. Priscilla stepped out in designer boots that probably cost more than most families spend on groceries. The gravel crunched under her feet like breaking glass. Her expensive French perfume hit my nostrils before she did, mixing with the honest scent of leather and hay. She had a clipboard, naturally, and started listing violations like she was reading my death sentence. Barn roof, unsightly. Those were hand-split. Cedar shingles, historically inaccurate fence line encroachment. That fence had been in place since 1874, long before her precious HOA. Livestock odor complaints from my 2 horses, Thunder and Jasmine. Excessive noise from morning rooster Sebastian, Melody's 4-H project, and the neighborhood's most reliable alarm clock. When I felt that crisp violation notice crumple between my calloused fingers, Melody appeared in the doorway behind me. The look on her face, confusion mixed with righteous anger, reminded me so much of Sarah. It nearly broke my heart. "Dad, why do these strangers want to destroy our home?" That's when the corporate consultant in me clicked in. This wasn't about property values. This was about power, control, and profit. I just didn't know yet how deep the rabbit hole went. 2 days after that inspection from hell, Priscilla made her next move. And let me tell you, this woman had all the subtlety of a freight train hauling dynamite through a nitroglycerin factory. I was teaching Melody how to repair a fence wire, one of those father-daughter moments that involves actual learning, not zombie scrolling through social media, when my neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, came rushing across the pasture. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, clutching a piece of paper in her weathered hands, fluttering in the morning breeze like a white flag of surrender. "Ezra," she panted, still smelling of jasmine tea. They had an emergency HOA meeting last night at the community center. That's when Priscilla's genius-level scheming revealed itself. The official notice listed the meeting location as 1247 Maple Street, a vacant lot overgrown with weeds since the Clinton administration. But the real meeting? It was held at 1247 Maple Lane, the actual community center, with exactly 3 people in attendance: Queen Priscilla and her 2 henchmen. The fresh ink smell on that violation notice told me this ambush had been planned, with surgical precision. They'd voted illegally, by the way, to impose a $500 per day fine starting immediately. $500 per day for the crime of owning a barn older than their collective brain cells. Here's the twist that really got my blood boiling. Priscilla had fabricated a stack of neighbor complaints about my property allegedly ruining everyone's home values. Handwritten letters from so-called concerned citizens describing how my eyesore was destroying the American dream. It was Shakespearean-level fiction, that pile of lies. I arrived at the community center just as they were wrapping up their kangaroo court. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry hornets, and the smell of burnt coffee and stale donuts hung in the air. Apparently, democracy in Sunset Meadows ran on caffeine and processed sugar. Well, Priscilla smiled, scratching aggressive notes across her legal pad like she was etching my death sentence in stone. "Mr. Colton, how refreshing that you finally decided to participate in community governance. Hard to participate when you deliberately send meeting notices to vacant lots," I shot back, pulling out my phone and hitting record. The satisfying click of the record button felt like loading a round into the chamber. "I hope you don't mind if I document this historic moment." Brad Hutchkins looked like he wanted to disappear into the industrial carpet. Dale Morrison just glared, apparently insulted by the idea of recording public meetings. "It's just an innocent clerical error." Priscilla waved her manicured talons dismissively. "The fines stand until our next properly scheduled meeting." That's when I unleashed 20 years of corporate consulting experience on her perfectly coiffed head. "Fascinating thing about HOA bylaws," I said, keeping my voice cool and steady. "Most states require them to follow the same open meeting laws as city councils. 72-hour notice to all residents for any official business. Secret meetings? Not only is that against your rules, it's potentially criminal." The silence in the room was so thick you could have built a fence out of it. "I'll be filing a formal request for your complete membership list, all meeting minutes from the past year, and copies of those neighbor complaints," I continued. "Public records laws are beautiful things, don't you think?" A cold, calculating flicker passed behind Priscilla's Botox-freeze features. "Of course, Mr. Colton, though I feel obligated to inform you that failure to pay properly assessed fines within 30 days results in an automatic lien against your property. A shame when families lose their homes over stubborn pride." After they slithered out like the snakes they were, Mrs. Bennett approached me cautiously, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Ezra," she whispered, "I need you to know I never filed any complaint about your property. None of us did. Mrs. Rodriguez loves watching Melody ride thunder in the mornings. She says it reminds her of her childhood in Mexico. And Janet Mills told me Sebastian's crowing brings back memories of her grandmother's farm in Iowa." By Friday, those illegal fines had ballooned to $3,500. $3,500 for the unforgivable crime of maintaining a historic barn and keeping horses. on land that had been home to livestock since before the automobile was a dream in Henry Ford's mind. But here's what Priscilla didn't count on. I'd already fired the first legal shot. Every procedural violation, every bogus meeting notice, every recorded threat, all carefully documented and submitted to the county clerk's office for review. That evening, I found myself in the barn, with thunder, the familiar scent of oat feed and worn leather calming my nerves. Melody appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the golden sunset light. "Dad, are we going to lose everything?" I looked at my daughter, 16 years old, with her mother's fierce spirit and her great-great-grandfather's stubborn chin, and I made her a blood oath. "Not while there's breath in my body, kiddo. Josiah Colton didn't survive claim jumpers and cattle rustlers just so we could roll over for a suburban tyrant with a fancy car and a bad attitude." This was getting ridiculous. Inspector Johnson was younger than Martinez, with the eager efficiency of someone trying to prove himself in a new job. "Let me guess," I said. "Anonymous complaint." "Actually, no, sir." This one came from, he checked his clipboard, Priscilla Worthington Hayes, HOA board chairwoman. Very detailed report about structural concerns. Johnson spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, and cross-referencing everything against county building codes. The barn, built in 1874, was grandfathered under historical preservation statutes. The house renovations I'd completed were all permitted and up to code. Even my new fence met every requirement in the book. "Mr. Colton," Johnson said finally, "I have to ask, what did you do to make someone this mad? This is the third bogus complaint from this HOA address in the past month. We're starting to wonder if someone's using our department for harassment." That's when I played my counterpunch. I filed a formal police report for vandalism and criminal trespassing, complete with HD video evidence of Dale Morrison's midnight fence sabotage expedition. I also contacted County Supervisor Williams, a man I'd worked with during my consulting days on municipal efficiency projects. "Williams," I said over the phone, "remember that audit we did on frivolous inspection calls draining county resources? I think I found you a perfect case study." By Thursday, the pattern was crystal clear. Priscilla wasn't just trying to find me into submission. She was attempting to weaponize every government agency she could think of. County health, building inspection, even the fire marshal got an anonymous tip about improperly stored flammable materials that turned out to be my perfectly legal gasoline, storage for farm equipment. The real revelation came Friday afternoon when Mrs. Bennett knocked on my door, looking more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Ezra," she whispered. "I overheard Priscilla on the phone yesterday. She was talking to her husband about accelerating the timeline and something about adjacent parcels." Mrs. Bennett's hands trembled as she continued. She said once they get rid of the problem properties, the whole area can be rezoned for their development project. That evening, I sat in my grandfather's old leather chair, the one that still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and honest work researching county planning records online. What I found made my blood run cold. Bradley Worthington's development company had quietly submitted preliminary inquiries about rezoning agricultural land in our area for high-density residential development. The timeline was becoming clear. This wasn't about HOA compliance or property values. This was about forcing out longtime residents so Priscilla's husband could bulldoze our history and build another cookie-cutter subdivision. I started keeping detailed logs of every inspection, every complaint, every violation notice. 20 years of corporate consulting had taught me that patterns of harassment become evidence in court and evidence wins cases. But I was also learning something else. When you're fighting corruption, you better make sure you're not fighting alone. The smell of fresh coffee brewing in my kitchen mixed with the sound of Melody practicing violin in the living room. Normal, sounds of home that Priscilla wanted to silence forever. Not in my watch. If you thought Priscilla's government agency harassment campaign was the bottom of her moral barrel, you'd be wrong. Turns out that barrel had a false bottom with a whole new level of nastiness waiting underneath. The social warfare began at the Hendersons' backyard barbecue, one of those neighborhood gatherings where everyone pretends to like each other while secretly judging whose lawn needs more fertilizer. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid hung heavy in the August air as I arrived with Melody, carrying Mrs. Bennett's famous potato salad as our contribution to suburban diplomacy. I should have known something was up when conversations died like someone had hit a mute button the moment we walked through the gate. Priscilla was holding court near the pool, surrounded by her usual collection of nodding heads and nervous smiles. She'd positioned herself like a spider in the center of her web, and I was about to discover just how tangled that web had become. "Oh, look," Priscilla announced loud enough for half the county to hear. "It's our local property value destroyer." Her laugh had all the warmth of a January mortgage payment. I was just sharing some concerns about having unstable influences in our peaceful community. The mini twist hit me like a slap when I realized what she'd been doing. Priscilla had been systematically working this barbecue like a political campaign, armed with a folder of doctored photographs showing my property. But these weren't the real pictures. She digitally added rust stains to my barn, made the fence look crooked, and even photoshopped in garbage that had never existed. "Priscilla," I said, stepping closer while keeping my voice level. "Mind if I see those photos? I'd love to compare them to the ones I took this morning." Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around the folder like a hawk protecting its prey. "I don't think that's necessary. Actually, I think it is." I pulled out my phone and started showing the real photos to anyone within earshot. The difference was night and day. My property looked exactly like what it was, a well-maintained historic ranch that had been lovingly restored. That's when something beautiful happened. Mrs. Rodriguez, a quiet woman who usually kept to herself, stepped forward and examined both sets of photos with the careful eye of someone who actually pays attention. "These don't match," she said firmly, her slight accent making her words carry extra weight. "I walk past the Colton place every morning with my dog. It looks nothing like these pictures." She turned to face the crowd, and I never signed any petition complaining about it. The domino effect was immediate and devastating to Priscilla's narrative. Jim Henderson, our host, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Actually, Priscilla, when you asked me to sign that petition, you said it was for playground improvements. I had no idea it was about Ezra's ranch." "Same here," called out Mike Torres from across the patio. "You told me we were petitioning for better street lighting." Priscilla's face went through more color changes than a traffic light having an electrical seizure. "There seems to be some confusion." "No confusion here," interrupted Janet Mills, the retired teacher I'd heard about but never met. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and the kind of backbone that probably terrified generations of 7th graders. "Priscilla, you tried the same tricks on me 2 years ago when you decided my vegetable garden was inappropriate for the neighborhood aesthetic. Harassment is harassment whether you're targeting tomatoes or horses." The crowd was shifting now, sensing blood in the water. People who'd been nodding along with Priscilla's propaganda were suddenly finding their spines and their voices. "Wait a minute," said Tom Bradley, a guy I'd barely spoken to before. "Are you telling me that rooster complaint was fake too? Because I actually love hearing Sebastian crow in the mornings. Reminds me of visiting my grandfather's farm in Nebraska." The social tide had turned completely. Instead of facing down a hostile crowd, I found myself surrounded by neighbors sharing their own stories of HOA intimidation. Apparently, Priscilla's reign of terror had touched almost every family in some way. Ridiculous fines for holiday decorations, demands to remove children's play equipment, even threats over the wrong mailbox colors. Mrs. Bennett, emboldened by the group's support, shared her story about being fined $200 for hanging wind chimes that were allegedly noise violations. The Rodriguez family revealed they'd been threatened with legal action over their small backyard shrine. Janet described months of harassment over her unauthorized herb garden. "Here's what I don't understand," I said, addressing the entire gathering. "While the setting sun painted everything golden, why are we letting one person terrorize an entire neighborhood? This is supposed to be a community, not a dictatorship." The barbecue had transformed from a social ambush into an impromptu town hall meeting. People were comparing notes, sharing documentation, and for the first time in years, standing up to the woman who'd been ruling through fear and intimidation. Priscilla, seeing her carefully constructed social empire crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane, gathered her remaining loyalists and stormed out, but not before delivering one final threat that made my blood run cold. "You people have no idea what you're getting yourselves into," she hissed. "Some problems require permanent solutions." As I watched her white Tesla screech out of the driveway, I realized the gloves were officially off. This wasn't about property values anymore. This was war. Friday morning found me at the county courthouse, surrounded by the musty smell of old paper and decades of bureaucratic dust. I'd been digging through property records for 3 hours, my eyes burning from reading microfilm documents that looked like they'd been copied on a machine from the Carter administration. That's when I hit the mother lode. Buried in a manila folder, marked HOA formation documents, Sunset Meadows, 1987, was a smoking gun so big it could have been seen from space. The original boundary survey for the HOA had a fatal flaw that would make any first-year law student laugh out loud. They'd never properly included the western properties in their legal formation documents. My ranch, along with 6 other original homesteads, had been paying HOA dues for 35 years without ever being legally bound by their authority. We were like prisoners who'd been voluntarily sitting in unlocked cells, paying our jailers for the privilege. But that wasn't even the best part. The financial records told Astri that would make a mob accountant blush. The Sunset Meadows HOA was drowning in $47,000 worth of legal debt, all owed to the law firm of Hutchkins, Morrison & Associates. And guess who the silent partner in that firm turned out to be? Bradley Worthington, Priscilla's dear husband. The conflict of interest was so blatant, it practically had neon signs pointing at it. Priscilla had been using HOA funds to pay her husband's law firm for harassment campaigns against residents who opposed their development plans. It was a money-laundering operation dressed up as community governance. I pulled out my phone and called my old colleague from Municipal Consulting, Sarah Kim, now working for the State Attorney General's office. Sarah, remember that seminar we attended about nonprofit corruption? I think I just found your next case study. The timeline became crystal clear as I cross-referenced the documents. County planning records showed that Bradley's development company had submitted preliminary applications for rezoning our entire area from agricultural to high-density residential. The proposed project would bulldoze every ranch and historic property to build 847 units of luxury townhomes, starting at $850,000 each. The math was staggering. If they could force out the existing property owners and get the zoning changed, Bradley stood to profit roughly $3.2 million from the land acquisition alone, not counting construction profits. No wonder Priscilla had been so aggressive. This wasn't about property values. It was about a generational wealth grab. But here's where my corporate consulting background gave me an edge that Priscilla never saw coming. I'd spent years helping municipalities identify development fraud, and this scheme had all the classic hallmarks: manufactured code violations, harassment campaigns, targeting resistant property owners, and artificial timeline pressure to force quick sales. The county zoning hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks from today. Every illegal fine, every bogus inspection, every social media smear campaign had been designed to pressure families into selling before they learned about the development windfall coming their way. I photographed every document, copied every filing, and built a timeline that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. But the real revelation came when I discovered the HOA election schedule. Priscilla's term as board chairwoman expired in exactly 18 days, and according to the bylaws, only 12 residents needed to attend the annual meeting to establish quorum for new elections. For 8 years, Priscilla had kept her power by holding elections at inconvenient times with minimal notice, ensuring only her allies showed up. But this year, armed with the truth about their illegal authority and financial corruption, I could change everything. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. The woman who'd been using HOA elections to maintain her stranglehold on the community was about to discover what democracy actually looked like when the voters showed up informed and angry. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun warming my face as I called Melody with the news. "Kiddo, your old man just learned something important. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and we're about to go on the attack." The revolution began in my kitchen on a Sunday morning with the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the sweet scent of determination. Mrs. Bennett sat at my grandfather's old oak table, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she spread financial documents across the surface like a general planning a military campaign. "Ezra," she said, her accountant's instincts sharp as a razor despite retirement. "This HOA has been operating like a personal piggy bank for years. Look at this. $8,000 for landscaping consultation paid to a company that doesn't exist. Another $12,000 for legal research that amounts to harassment letters." Janet Mills arrived next, carrying a worn copy of Robert's Rules of Order like it was sacred scripture. The retired teacher had that look in her eyes that probably made misbehaving students wet themselves back in the day. "I've been documenting procedural violations for 2 years," she announced, dropping a 3-in binder on the table with a satisfying thump. "Priscilla's been running this HOA like her personal kingdom. But kingdoms fall when the people remember they have power." Manuel Rodriguez knocked on the back door, work boots still dusty from his morning electrical job. His wife Carmen followed, carrying a laptop and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent years teaching civics to teenagers and was ready to put theory into practice. "We're in," Manuel said simply. "Carmen's been researching state HOA regulations, and what we found would make your head spin. Half the fees they've been charging are illegal under state law." The coalition was growing faster than kudu and summer rain. Pete from the feed store had connected us with 3 other property owners who'd been targeted by Priscilla's harassment campaigns. Each family brought their own evidence of corruption, fabricated violations, illegal fines, and documented threats. Our strategy developed in phases, like Acus's game played across multiple boards simultaneously. Phase 1 involved challenging the HOA's authority over my ranch through a quiet title action, basically proving in court that they'd never had legal jurisdiction over my property in the first place. Carmen had discovered that 23 other properties in our area had the same problem. They'd been illegally included in HOA boundaries without proper notification or consent. Phase 2 focused on the financial corruption. Mrs. Bennett's forensic accounting skills, honed through decades of catching embezzlement schemes, had uncovered a pattern of fund diversions that would make the FBI's white-collar crime unit salivate. Every bogus legal fee, every padded contract, every mysterious administrative expense was documented with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. "The beauty of financial crimes," Mrs. Bennett explained while adjusting her glasses, "is that criminals always leave paper trails. They can't help themselves." Phase 3 was pure political warfare, running a slate of reform candidates in the upcoming HOA election. Janet had researched every bylaw, every procedural requirement, every loophole that Priscilla had exploited over the years. We would beat her at her own game, using the very rules she twisted for her benefit. But Phase 4 was my personal favorite, exposing the development scheme before the county zoning vote. Manuel's connections in the construction industry had revealed that Bradley's company was already lining up subcontractors for a project that hadn't been approved yet. The arrogance was breathtaking. They were so confident in their corruption that they'd started spending money before stealing the land. The technical preparation resembled something between a law school study group and a military planning session. Carmen created digital filing systems with backup copies stored in 3 separate locations. Cloud storage, external drives, and good old-fashioned paper files locked in Janet's fireproof home safe. "Information warfare," Carmen explained to the group. "Control the narrative, control the outcome." We organized door-to-door campaigns explaining residents' rights in the upcoming election. Janet designed simple flyers breaking down complex legal concepts into language that wouldn't require a law degree to understand. The timeline of HOA corruption, the evidence of financial mismanagement, and the proof of harassment campaigns, all laid out in bullet points that hit harder than a championship boxer. Melody surprised everyone by volunteering to handle social media outreach. "Dad, you guys are fighting this like it's 1987. Let me show you how to reach people who actually vote." Within 3 days, she'd created a private Facebook group that connected 47 neighborhood families, sharing information and coordinating resistance efforts. The knowledge-sharing sessions felt like underground university classes. I taught people how to research property deeds and HOA formation documents at the courthouse skills I'd learned during my municipal consulting days. Mrs. Bennett explained how to spot financial red flags in HOA budgets. Janet conducted workshops on parliamentary procedure and residents' rights, but the most important preparation was psychological. For 8 years, Priscilla had ruled through fear and intimidation. People had been isolated, afraid to speak up, convinced they were powerless against the HOA machine. Our coalition meetings changed that dynamic completely. "Strength in numbers," Pete observed during one evening strategy session. The taste of his wife's homemade apple pie sweetening the air. Bullies only pick on people they think are alone. Election day was 13 days away. The county zoning vote loomed 4 weeks beyond that. We had our timeline, our evidence, our candidates, and most importantly, our courage. The war for our community was about to begin in earnest. Desperation has a smell sharp, acrid, like burnt electrical wiring mixed with expensive perfume. I caught that scent the moment Bradley Worthington stepped out of his silver Mercedes in my driveway, straightening his thousand suit like armor before battle. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of perfect autumn weather that makes you believe in second chances. I was teaching Melody how to replace a fence post honest work that connects you to the land in ways suburban developers will never understand when Bradley came, calling with his briefcase full of promises and threats. "Ezra," he said, extending a manicured hand that had never held anything heavier than a golf club. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to make you an offer that could solve all our problems." The mini twist hit me like a lightning bolt when he opened that briefcase. Inside was a purchase contract for $2.88 million, nearly $500,000 above market value for my 47 acres. The papers were already drawn up, complete with expedited closing terms and a cash settlement that could happen within 30 days. "This is generous, Bradley, almost too generous." I kept my voice steady while my corporate consultant brain started calculating angles. "What's the rush?" His smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. "Well, the truth is, we're planning a development that could transform this entire area. Premium luxury homes, golf course access, real estate values that would make everyone wealthy. But we need to move quickly to secure financing." What he didn't know was that my phone was recording every word. In my state, single-party consent makes conversations like this pure legal gold. And Bradley was about to confess to a conspiracy that would make federal prosecutors dance with joy. "Of course," he continued, "if you choose not to sell, well, legal costs can be astronomical. Harassment lawsuits, property disputes, zoning challenges, they add up fast, especially when you're fighting people with unlimited resources and political connections." The threat was clear as mountain air. Take the money or be destroyed financially. But here's what Bradley's arrogance blinded him to. I'd been documenting his wife's harassment campaign for months, and his generous offer was really just evidence of the conspiracy's scope. "I'll need time to consider this," I said, shaking his soft hand again. "Big decisions shouldn't be rushed." After he drove away, leaving tire tracks in my gravel like territorial markings, I called an emergency coalition meeting. Within 2 hours, my kitchen was packed with angry neighbors who'd received similar offers from Bradley's company. The Rodriguez family had been approached with $1.9 million for their 23 acres. Janet Mills got an offer for her historic cottage that was 40% above appraisal value. Even Mrs. Bennett, with her modest 2-acre lot, received a buyout proposal that would set her up for life. "It's a coordinated campaign," Carmen observed, her teacher's mind connecting dots with mathematical precision. "They're trying to buy out everyone before the zoning hearing." But Priscilla wasn't finished with her bag of dirty tricks. The harassment escalated top psychological warfare levels that would impress military strategists. Anonymous flyers appeared, on every doorstep claiming I was a dangerous loner with a history of violence-complete fiction, but printed on professional paper with graphics that looked official. Melody came home from school on Thursday with red-rimmed eyes and clenched fists. "Dad, kids are saying things. Horrible things about you, about us. Their parents are telling them to stay away from me." The social media attacks were coordinated and vicious. Anonymous accounts with stolen profile pictures were posting doctored photos and fabricated stories about my family across neighborhood Facebook groups. They claimed I was operating an illegal business, hiding financial problems, even suggesting that Sarah's death hadn't been from cancer. That last lie nearly broke my legendary self-control. Friday brought the nuclear option, a killed protective services investigation triggered by anonymous reports of an unsafe environment for Melody. The CPS caseworker, Linda Torres, was professional but thorough, examining our home with the intensity of a crime scene investigator. "Mr. Colton," she said after 2 hours of inspection, "I want you to know that your home environment is exemplary. This appears to be a harassment complaint designed to waste state resources and intimidate your family." But the mini twist that really showed Priscilla's desperation came Saturday morning. I woke to find our ranch entrance gate chained shut with industrial locks and fake condemned don't enter signs posted on my property. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd essentially imprisoned us on our own land. My security cameras captured everything in high-definition detail. Dale Morrison and Brad Hutchkins sneaking around at 3 a.m. like discount cat burglars, installing the chains and posting the bogus signs. Their faces were clear enough for a police lineup. The insurance company harassment was almost laughably obvious. Anonymous tips claiming my ranch was a high-risk property due to structural deficiencies and dangerous animals resulted in a surprise inspection from my insurance carrier. The investigator, a 30-year veteran named Tom Walsh, took one look around and started asking pointed questions about who was filing false claims. "Son," Walsh told me after his inspection, "I've seen this before. Someone's trying to get your policy cannelled so you'll be forced to sell. It's fraud, plain and simple, and I'll be reporting it to state investigators." By Sunday evening, the coalition had documented 17 separate incidents of harassment, vandalism, and fraud in just 1 week. Priscilla's desperation was accelerating her timeline, but it was also creating an evidence trail that would convict her in any court in America. The woman who'd ruled through fear was about to learn what real fear felt like. If you thought Priscilla had reached the bottom of her moral cesspool, you'd be wrong. Turns out, when cornered predators get desperate, they reveal just how savage they can become. The final assault began with a propaganda blitzkrieg that would make political campaign managers weep with admiration. Professional quality flyers appeared, overnight in every mailbox, featuring my ranch house photo under headlines like "Dangerous Neighbor," "Threatens Community Safety and Unstable Property Owner Puts Families at Risk." The production values were impressive: glossy paper, professional layout, even a fake website called ConcernedNeighborsUnited.com that looked like a legitimate grassroots organization. Whoever Priscilla hired for this smear campaign had serious money and zero conscience. But the mini-twist that revealed her complete desperation came Tuesday morning when I discovered my water lines to the horse troughs had been cut during a freezing night in August. Someone had used industrial tools to slice through buried pipes, then turned on outdoor faucets to flood my property during the coldest snap we'd had in months. Thunder and Jasmine could have died from dehydration or hypothermia. The cruelty was breathtaking, even for Priscilla's standards. My security cameras told the whole story in crystal clear 4K resolution. Dale Morrison and another man I didn't recognize, wearing dark clothes and carrying professional-grade pipe cutters, working by flashlight at 2:47 a.m., like a demolition crew from hell. "Dad," Melody said, her voice shaking as we surveyed the damage. "They tried to kill our horses. How is that legal?" It wasn't legal. It was criminal vandalism with intent to cause animal harm, and I had them dead to rights on video. Wednesday brought the nuclear option. Anonymous calls to the IRS claiming I was operating an unreported commercial stable and hiding income from the government. The audit notice arrived with the efficiency of a government agency that smells blood in the water. But here's where Priscilla's overconfidence became her downfall. The fake social media accounts spreading lies about my family were traced back to IP addresses registered to Worthington Development LLC. Carmen's tech-savvy son had done some digital detective work that would make FBI cybercrime units proud. Mrs. Hayes is about as subtle as a brick through a window, 17-year-old Miguel Rodriguez announced during our emergency Thursday night coalition meeting. She's been posting from her husband's office computer. I have screenshots, IP logs, and metadata that prove everything. The harassment campaign reached its crescendo Friday when Child Protective Services received their second anonymous complaint, this time claiming Melody was being exploited for manual labor and living in primitive conditions without proper amenities. The caller specifically mentioned that we didn't have cable television or high-speed internet, as if that constituted child abuse. CPS investigator Linda Torres returned looking more irritated than a cat in a rainstorm. "Mr. Cololton, I'm required to investigate every complaint. But this is clearly harassment. Your daughter is healthy, well-educated, and living in better conditions than 90% of families I visit." The insurance fraud escalated when anonymous reports claimed I was operating an illegal boarding stable and unlicensed veterinary clinic on residential property. My insurance company, Mountain States Agricultural, sent investigator Tom Walsh back for a second visit. "Son," Walsh said, examining the cut water lines and chain-locked gate, "this isn't about insurance violations. Someone's trying to destroy your life, and they're committing felonies to do it." But the overreach that sealed Priscilla's fate came Saturday morning. I woke to find my ranch entrance gate not just chained, but welded shut with industrial equipment. Fake, condemned by County Health Department. Signs were posted on my property, complete with forged official seals and phone numbers that led to disconnected voicemails. The craftsmanship was professional. Someone had spent serious money to make these forgeries look authentic. But they'd made one critical mistake. The County Health Department seal was from 2019, and the current version had subtle design changes that any real inspector would notice immediately. My security footage captured the entire operation. Dale Morrison, Brad Hutchkins, and two men in welding gear working for 3 hours in the pre-dawn darkness, installing permanent barriers that would trap us on our own property. The criminal evidence was overwhelming now. Conspiracy, harassment, fraud, vandalism, animal endangerment, impersonating government officials. Priscilla's desperation had created a prosecutor's dream case. But the moment that crystallized everything came Sunday afternoon when County Supervisor Williams called my cell phone directly. "Ezra," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "we've been monitoring the situation. The fake county signs crossed a line that's federal fraud impersonating government authority. The FBI white-collar crime unit wants to talk with you." The coalition meeting that evening felt more like a victory celebration than air assistance planning session. We had documented evidence of systematic harassment, financial fraud, conspiracy to commit development fraud, and enough criminal activity to put Priscilla and her crew away for years. "She pushed too hard," Janet observed, reviewing our evidence. Files with the satisfaction of a teacher watching her worst student finally get caught cheating. Desperation makes people stupid, and stupid criminals leave evidence trails that lead straight to prison. Election day was 4 days away. The county zoning hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after that. We had everything we needed to destroy Priscilla's empire and expose the development conspiracy. But first, we had to survive until Tuesday night because cornered animals don't just bite. Sometimes they try to burn down the entire forest to escape. Tuesday evening, the Sunset Meadows Community Center buzzed with an electric tension I hadn't felt since my corporate days, when hostile takeover meetings decided billion-dollar fates. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with nervous sweat as 73 residents packed into a room designed for 30, creating the largest HOA meeting turnout in the neighborhood's history. Channel 7 News had set up their camera equipment near the back wall, their bright lights casting harsh shadows across faces that ranged from curious to furious. Reporter Jessica Martinez adjusted her microphone while scanning the crowd like a hawk hunting for the perfect soundbite. County Supervisor Williams sat in the front row, his presence adding official weight to what everyone knew would be a historic evening. Even the local newspaper had sent their senior reporter, a weathered man named Frank, who'd been covering corruption scandals since before I was born. Priscilla arrived fashionably late, flanked by a lawyer who looked expensive enough to finance, a small country, and 2 private security guards who seemed confused about why they were protecting someone at a neighborhood meeting. Her white Tesla practically glowed under the parking lot lights, as she made her grand entrance like a queen arriving for her coronation. What she found instead was her execution. The meeting opened with Janet Mills reading the official agenda, her teacher's voice cutting through the murmur of conversations like a sword through silk. First order of business, financial audit results presented by Mrs. Bennett. Mrs. Bennett stood at the podium, her accountant's precision transforming complex financial crimes into simple, devastating facts. "Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 3 years, your HOA board has misappropriated $67,000 in dues for personal legal expenses, fake consulting fees, and fraudulent administrative costs." The gasp from the crowd sounded like air escaping from a punctured balloon. Priscilla shot to her feet, her lawyer whispering frantically in her. "This is outrageous slander," she began. "Mrs. Hayes," Janet interrupted smoothly, "you'll have your turn to speak during the designated comment period." That's when I stood up, feeling the weight of 4 generations of Colton determination flowing through my veins. Before we continue, I think everyone should hear something interesting. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Bradley's bribery attempt, his voice crystal clear through the community center's sound system. Legal costs can be astronomical, especially when you're fighting people with unlimited resources and political connections. The silence was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. That I announced is the voice of Bradley Worthington threatening me with financial ruin if I didn't sell my ranch to his development company. And it gets better. The next revelation hit like a meteorite. I presented the evidence of illegal HOA boundary formation, the proof that 23 properties had been paying dues for decades without ever being legally included in the association's authority. Priscilla Hayes has been collecting money from families she had no legal right to govern, I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. But the real crime is what she planned to do with our land. A development scheme. Documents spread across the projection screen like a roadmap to corruption. The proposed 847-unit luxury development, the $3.2 million profit projections, the timeline that required forcing out existing residents before they learned about the windfall coming their way. Every harassment campaign, every bogus fine, every manufactured crisis was designed to pressure families into selling their homes below market value so the Worthington family could profit from our misery. Priscilla's facade finally cracked like ice under spring sunshine. "You people have no idea what you're interfering with," she shrieked, her composure dissolving into pure rage. "This neighborhood was nothing before we brought standards and property values. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her quiet voice carrying more power than Priscilla's screaming. "Grateful for being fined $200 because my grandmother's shrine offended your aesthetic sensibilities?" The floodgates opened. Resident after resident shared stories of harassment, intimidation, and financial abuse. Tom Bradley described being fined for Christmas lights. The Hendersons revealed threats over their children's swing set. Even shy Mrs. Patterson spoke about being terrorized over her cat feeding birds in her own backyard. But the mic drop moment came when Police Chief Anderson entered the room, his uniform and badge commanding immediate attention. "Priscilla Hayes," he announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, harassment, vandalism, and impersonating government officials." The security cameras had done their job. Every midnight vandalism session, every forged document, every criminal act was documented in high-defined detail. Dale Morrison and Brad Hutchkins were already in custody, singing like canaries about their roles in the conspiracy. As handcuffs clicked around Priscilla's wrists, she turned toward me with pure venom in her eyes. "This isn't over, Colton. My husband has connections you can't imagine." Actually, County Supervisor Williams stood up. "Your husband was arrested this morning for development fraud and conspiracy. The FBI tends to work early hours." The election proceeded, with the solemnity of a democratic ritual restored to its proper dignity. Secret ballots were cast under official supervision, with vote counts witnessed by multiple observers and recorded by media cameras. When Janet Mills announced the results, Ezra Colton elected HOA president with 89% of the vote. The applause shook the building's foundation. The new board's first official act was unanimous. All illegal fines and violations were hereby rescinded, effective immediately. Justice tasted sweeter than my grandmother's apple pie. Months later, the transformation of Sunset Meadows felt like watching a garden bloom after surviving a biblical plague of locusts. The sweet smell of Mrs. Az Rodriguez's famous tamales wafted across the community center parking lot, mixing with the sound of children's laughter and the satisfying crunch of gravel under the wheels of moving trucks. But this time, they were bringing families in, not driving them away. Justice arrived with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the satisfaction of perfect revenge. Priscilla received 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and harassment. Plenty of time to practice her entitled attitude on cellmates who wouldn't be impressed by her manicure budget. Bradley got 3 years for development fraud, while Dale Morrison and Brad Hutchkins received suspended sentences after singing like contestants on a reality TV singing competition. The financial recovery was so complete it felt like Christmas morning lasted for 3 months. Professional auditors untangled 8 years of corruption and recovered $89,000 in stolen community funds. Y immediately slashed monthly dues by 40% and established a real community improvement fund that actually improved things instead of funding Priscilla's legal harassment campaigns. Our crown jewel became the Heritage Memorial Garden on what used to be Priscilla's secret slush fund. Disguised as administrative land, Mrs. Bennett designed a beautiful space celebrating our neighborhood's agricultural roots, complete with heirloom, fruit trees, and a gazebo where local kids could learn about the families who'd farmed this land when horses were transportation, not hobbies. The annual Labor Day barbecue at Colton Ranch evolved into our unofficial neighborhood family reunion. The sound of children giggling while learning two-brush thunder mixed with the aroma of Pete's legendary brisket slow smoking over hickory wood. Melody, now 17 and headed to law school, had transformed her project into writing lessons that taught local kids about responsibility, respect, and the therapeutic power of honest work. "Dad," she said, watching 8-year-old Emma carefully leading Jasmine around the ring. "I want to specialize in consumer protection law, help families fight the kind of corruption we beat." The pride swelling in my chest could have powered the entire county grid. Sarah's spirit lived on in our daughter's fierce sense of justice. The Colton Ranch Historical Preservation Scholarship launched with $25,000 in community funding money that used to disappear into Priscilla's legal slush fund, now sending 3 deserving students to study law, journalism, and civic engagement. Future generations would understand that democracy isn't a spectator sport. The ripple effects spread like wildfire across Texas. County Supervisor Williams championed the Sunset Meadows reforms, stronger HO oversight, mandatory financial audits, and criminal penalties for harassment campaigns. State legislators introduced the Homeowner Protection Act, requiring proper formation procedures and giving residents real weapons against corrupt boards. Property values soared 12% after we eliminated the climate of fear. Turns out families prefer communities governed by democracy instead of dictatorship run by suburban sociopaths. Revolutionary concept. Apparently, the call that changed everything came on a crisp October morning, while Melody and I were replacing century-old shingles on the barn roof, continuing our family tradition of building things that last longer than political careers. "Mr. Colton," the trembling voice belonged to Maria Santos, a 73-year-old grandmother from Pine Valley. "We heard about your victory over that terrible HOA woman. Our senior community is under attack by corrupt board members trying to force elderly residents out so developers can steal our homes. These people are targeting grandmothers who built this community with their own hands. Could you possibly help us?" I looked at Melody, whose eyes already blazed with righteous fury inherited from 4 generations of Colton who never backed down from bullies. "Mrs. Santos," I said, "pack your documentation. The Karen-fighting cavalry is coming to town. Today, as I write this story, our coalition has helped 17 communities defeat corrupt HOAs across 3 states. We've recovered over $400,000 in stolen funds, sent 12 board members to prison, and proved that ordinary people can beat extraordinary corruption when they work together. Every sunset at the ranch, as Sebastian crows his evening song and horses graze on land that's been home to 5 generations, I'm reminded that the American dream isn't about perfect lawns or HOA compliance. It's about standing up for what's right, protecting your family, and leaving your community better than you found it. Drop a comment below and share your HOA horror story. Let's build an army of neighbors fighting back against these suburban dictators. Hit that subscribe button and join the Karen Stories family because we're not done exposing corruption, celebrating justice, and proving that everyday heroes can beat extraordinary villains when they refuse to give up.